Be careful not to knock anything over, dear. That glass is worth more than his monthly salary, whispered the platinum-haired woman, as Kesha poured champagne at the head table of the Metropolitan Hotel in Manhattan. The high-pitched laughter echoed among the guests, the kind of laughter that cuts to the soul because it assumes you're too small to matter. Kesha was 25 years old, worked 3 jobs to support her 4-year-old daughter, and her simple appearance, basic black uniform, curly hair pulled back into a discreet bun, made her practically invisible to those people. The ballroom sparkled, with baccarat crystal and Italian marble, every detail screaming wealth. The center table held the $8 billion merger agreement that dominated the evening's conversation. Richard Whitmore, the billionaire host, presided over the table with the authority of someone who never had to prove his worth. Around him, executives, shareholders, and lawyers celebrated what would be the biggest deal of the year in the technology sector. Kesha was just a waitress there to serve drinks and disappear. But when her eyes caught a specific clause in the contract, she froze. She approached his side, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mr. Whitmore, don't sign that." What happened next left the entire room in absolute silence. Kesha didn't seem to belong in that world. Her beauty was natural, without elaborate makeup or expensive jewelry, just a serene face that carried a quiet dignity. She had grown up in the Bronx, raised by her grandmother who cleaned offices at night and taught her that education was the only inheritance no one could steal from her. People looked at her and saw someone out of place, someone who should know her place. But Kesha had never been invisible. She never had been. "Excuse me? Did you say something?" asked a gray-haired shareholder, her voice dripping with condescension. "Because I'm sure I didn't hear a waitress giving her opinion on billion-dollar businesses." The table erupted in laughter. A woman in a flashy red dress covered her mouth with her hand, whispering loudly enough for everyone to hear. How embarrassing. Someone should explain to her how these things work. A man with a thin mustache shook his head. She probably can't even read these documents properly. She should be in the kitchen, not here. Kesha continued serving, her hands steady, her face impassive. She owed them no explanation. As she moved on to the next table, a young woman in a gold dress turned to her friend. "Look at the state of her shoes. She clearly has no business being here." Her companion laughed. "I bet she came to pick up leftovers to take home." The words hit her like slaps, but Kesha didn't stop. She adjusted a napkin with precise movements, as if anchoring herself against the storm of cruelty. Some guests turned to watch, waiting to see her break. She didn't break. The contract remained in the center of the table like the trophy of the night. Billions of dollars, entire companies, all boiled down to pages of incomprehensible legal text. Whitmore watched everything with his calculating eyes, the kind of man who didn't need to raise his voice to be respected. When Kesha refilled a glass, her eyes returned to the document. Her breath almost stopped. There it was, a reverse transfer. Clause buried in the middle of the legalese. Her late father, Professor Marcus Johnson, had taught her about it years ago. "It's a trap, daughter," he had said, sitting at his desk cluttered with books when she was a teenager. "It seems harmless, but it can destroy an empire in 30 days. Her father had been a leading authority on behavioral economics, the kind of man banks consulted in times of crisis. He died when Kesha was 17, leaving behind only his books and handwritten notes. She had read everything, every page, until the words became part of her. Without hesitation, she approached Whitmore. "Don't sign that!" The room erupted in hysterical laughter. The lead lawyer, adjusting his glasses, leaned forward. "Who do you think you are to interrupt billionaires?" His voice dripped with contempt as the laughter grew. "She must think she's in a movie," said a woman with huge earrings to her companion, laughing loudly. "Saving the day like a heroine." An executive with a gold chain around his neck snorted. "This is adult conversation. Go do your job." The whispers grew, turning Kesha into a joke. The manager, a nervous man with a fake smile, rushed over to her. "Kesha, what are you doing? You're causing a scene." She didn't look at him. Her eyes remained fixed on Whitmore, who now watched her with a curious expression, as if seeing her for the first time. Her hands clenched the tray, but her voice remained calm. "Transfer of all parent company assets within 30 days. She pointed to the contract with a steady finger. The laughter stopped abruptly. There, in front of all the contemptuous stares, she stood firm like someone guarding a secret too powerful to be revealed before the right time. If this story of prejudice touched you, subscribe to the channel to find out how a moment of humiliation would turn into a lesson that this elite would never forget. A shareholder with gold-rimmed glasses quickly flipped through the pages, her forehead wrinkling as she read. Her fingers stopped abruptly on the line Kesha had pointed to. "My God," she muttered, her voice almost inaudible. "What is it?" asked Whitmore, leaning forward. She's right," stammered the shareholder, her face draining of color. "Complete transfer of assets within 30 days of signing. That would leave us with nothing." The silence that followed was deafening, but it lasted only seconds before the room exploded in furious denial. "Impossible!" shouted the lead lawyer, snatching the document from the shareholder's hands. "A waitress can't understand contracts. That took me weeks to review." The woman in the red dress laughed contemptuously. "Are you really taking a maid seriously? She probably didn't even finish high school." The burly executive slammed his fist on the table. "This is ridiculous. We're allowing a—" He hesitated, but his eyes said it all. "A random person to sabotage a billion-dollar deal." Kesha remained motionless, but inside she felt every word like a stab. It wasn't the first time she had faced this. From her childhood, in the Bronx, when teachers assumed she couldn't keep up with advanced classes, to jobs where she was consistently underestimated, her grandmother Dorothy always said, "Honey, let them think you're small. When they show you who they really are, you'll be 10 steps ahead." The hotel manager appeared at her side, whispering urgently, "Kesha, you need to stop this. You're going to lose your job and you could even be sued for interfering with guest relations." She nodded silently but didn't move. Her eyes remained fixed on the contract as memories flooded her mind. She was 14 when her father came home frustrated after discovering that a family had lost everything because they didn't understand a similar clause. "People are being cheated every day by these contracts," he had said, opening his books on the kitchen table. "They use complicated words to hide the traps. That's why you need to learn to read between the lines." For years, even after he died in a car accident when she was 17, Kesha continued to study his notes. She worked during the day as a cleaning lady in offices, but at night, she devoured books on economics, business law, anything she could find at the public library. When she became pregnant at 21, many thought she would give up her studies. Instead, she studied while her daughter slept, memorizing complex concepts between midnight feedings. "Miss," said a man in a pinstripe suit, his voice dripping with condescension, "I admire your initiative, but this is a job for qualified professionals. Perhaps you should go back to your job." The platinum-haired woman nodded to a colleague. "See, that's exactly why I always say certain people should know their place. Imagine if everyone started giving their opinion on serious business matters." "It's embarrassing," whispered another executive. "Imagine if this leaked to the press. Billionaire halts merger because Waitress had an opinion. It would be humiliating." Kesha felt something burn in her chest. Not exactly anger, but an iron determination that came from years of being underestimated. She remembered the time a client treated her like she was invisible while discussing investment strategies she knew were completely wrong, or when a lawyer talked about her as if she weren't there, assuming she wouldn't understand basic legal terms. Every insult, every look of disdain, every time someone treated her as less capable because of her appearance or social status, had fueled a flame inside her. Her 4-year-old daughter, Brooklyn, would be raised in a different world, a world where a black girl from the suburbs could speak up and be heard. "Listen," Whitmore finally said, his voice cutting through the hubbub. "Regardless of who noticed it first, we need to understand if there really is something problematic with this contract." The opposing lawyer, a thin man with a thin mustache, forced a laugh. "Richard, don't tell me you're considering canceling an $8 billion deal because of this." He gestured vaguely toward Kesha. "She doesn't even know how to use a calculator properly," sneered a woman with extravagant jewelry. "How could she possibly understand complex corporate structures?" But Kesha noticed something the others didn't. Whitmore was actually reading the clause now, his eyes scanning each word with growing concern. And he wasn't the only one. 2 other shareholders had leaned forward to examine the document, their expressions gradually changing from contempt to unease. She knew that look. It was the same look she saw on her father's face when he discovered a legal trap, the same expression she herself had when she recognized the pattern in those pages. For a moment, when she saw Whitmore pause on a specific line, her breath almost stopped. He had found the second clause, the one she hadn't mentioned yet, the one that would turn the problem from catastrophic to apocalyptic. Each new attempt to silence her only strengthened something inside Keisha that her oppressors couldn't see. A silent force fueled by the very injustice they inflicted, were trying to impose. What those privileged people didn't know was that every act of contempt was writing her own sentence, and the final judgment was closer than anyone could imagine. While the lawyers furiously argued the validity of the clause, Kesha discreetly removed his cell phone from his apron pocket. Her hands trembled slightly as she typed a quick message. "Professor Williams, I need to confirm something urgent about reverse transfer contracts. It's about those cases that my father documented." The reply came within seconds. "Kesha, where are you? Those contracts are extremely rare and dangerous. I'll call you in 5 minutes." Dr. Marcus Williams had been his father's best friend and research colleague at the university. When Professor Johnson died, Williams became a father figure to Keisha, secretly helping her with her self-taught studies. He knew she had inherited not only her father's books, but also her genius for spotting financial traps. "Miss," said a harsh voice behind her. It was the lead lawyer on the merger, Dr. Harrison Beck, a man who charged $1,000 an hour and made no secret of his disdain. "Would you mind putting your phone away during a serious discussion? Some of us have billions at stake here." "Sorry," Kesha muttered, putting his phone away, but his eyes remained fixed on the contract, scanning lines that the others had completely ignored. Her, the woman in the red dress, rolled her eyes dramatically. See, she can't even keep her attention focused. Typical of people who don't understand the magnitude of what's happening here. "She's probably texting her boyfriend," sneered an executive, in a gold tie, telling him how she saved a billionaire today. It'll be the talk of her girlfriend's group. Laughter spread around the table, but Kesha ignored it completely. Her mind was processing something far more serious than anyone could have imagined. It wasn't just a problematic clause. It was a complete asset stripping scheme that would turn Whitmore Industries into a shell company in a matter of weeks. His phone vibrated silently. Williams had sent her 3 academic articles about similar cases that had destroyed billion-dollar companies in the previous decade. They all followed the same pattern she was seeing on those pages. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, interrupting a heated discussion among the lawyers. "Can I speak with you privately for a moment?" The silence was instant and awkward. "This has gone way beyond the pale," Dr. Beck exploded, his face red with indignation. "A waitress interrupting executive meetings. This is unacceptable." A woman wearing extravagant jewelry leaned toward her friend. She must be feeling important after getting one thing right by accident. Now she thinks she's a financial consultant. "Pathetic," muttered another man. She probably can't even calculate a simple percentage and wants to give advice on billion-dollar mergers. But Whitmore raised his hand, silencing the room. 2 minutes, he said, gesturing for Kesha to approach him. She walked over to him, feeling all eyes burning into her back. When she leaned in to whisper, her voice was low but firm. Page 63, line 9. They're not just buying his company, Mr. Whitmore. They're buying the right to take on all her personal debt as well, including the mortgage on her home and the shares she owns in other companies. Whitmore quickly flipped to the indicated page. His eyes widened when he found the specific line written in legal language so complex that even he had overlooked it. "How did you?" he began. But Kesha was already returning to her position. "There's no way she could understand that," Dr. Beck said aloud, trying to read over Whitmore's shoulder. "She must be making it up to get attention." But the billionaire wasn't listening anymore. He grabbed his own phone and typed furiously, "I need my personal lawyer here now. Maximum emergency." Meanwhile, Kesha received another message from Williams. "I've analyzed the pattern you described. Kesha, this isn't just a merger, it's a hostile takeover in disguise. If they sign this, they'll lose everything in 90 days. Your instincts are correct, just as his instincts have always been." She put her phone away and watched the confusion grow at the table. The executives from the acquiring company were starting to get nervous about Whitmore's sudden hesitation. His leader, a bald man with sunglasses named Henderson, was leaning closer and closer over the table. "Richard, don't tell me you're considering canceling because of some employee's conspiracy theories," Henderson said, forcing a laugh. "That's ridiculous, even for you." "Maybe we should explain to her how the real world works," suggested a platinum-haired woman with a cruel smile. "People like her need to understand his place in society." Kesha felt something familiar burn in his chest. The same determination that had made her study late into the night when everyone told her she should be realistic about her limitations. The same strength that had made her graduate at the top of her class in high school, even though she worked part-time to help with household expenses. She remembered the nights at the public library reading about economics while other moms her age were out having fun. The times college professors laughed when she showed up at open lectures, assuming she was just an uneducated, curious person. Every time someone underestimated her because of her appearance, her age, her color, her background, but they never saw what William saw when he informally tested her knowledge the previous year. A mind that processed complex financial information as easily as others read newspapers. An ability to detect patterns and inconsistencies that had been honed by years of obsessive study of his father's work. Whitmore's phone rang. He answered quickly. "Doug, I need you to review a contract urgently." "Yes, I'm emailing it now." "No, it can't wait until tomorrow." Henderson was getting visibly irritated. "Richard, this is getting ridiculous. We have deadlines to meet and investors waiting, and I have a company to protect," his Whitmore replied dryly without taking his eyes off the document. A female executive in a blue blazer whispered loudly enough for Kesha to hear. "Imagine if this leaks to the press. Billionaire cancels merger because he believed a waitress. It would be humiliating for all of us." Kesha continued working silently. But now every move was calculated. She knew exactly where every problematic clause was in that contract. She knew there were at least 3 more pitfalls that no one had discovered yet. And most importantly, she knew that Williams was on his way with information that would turn that night into something much bigger than a simple canceled merger. As she collected empty glasses, she watched Henderson nervously typing on his phone, probably informing his superiors about the unforeseen situation. The man had no idea that Kesha had discreetly photographed several pages of the contract when no one was looking, and that those images were already in the hands of one of the most respected economists in the country. The truth was that this merger wasn't just unfair, it was criminal. And in less than an hour, when Williams arrived with a complete documentation of the precedent cases, everyone in that room would discover that they had underestimated not just a waitress, but a mind that understood the financial world better than many of his own lawyers. For a moment, as Henderson watched her collecting plates with apparent submission, he smiled condescendingly, convinced that he had regained control of the situation. What he couldn't imagine was that every second of his arrogance was being documented, and that very soon he would discover that underestimating Kesha Johnson had been the most expensive mistake of her career. The hall door opened at exactly 10:15 p.m., and Professor Marcus Williams entered like a silent storm. At 62, with impeccable gray hair and the bearing of someone who had advised presidents during economic crisis, he carried a leather briefcase that seemed to weigh more than the future of everyone present. Dr. Williams Whitmore stood up immediately, recognizing the legendary economist. "What brings you here?" Williams walked directly to Kesha, who continued collecting plates as if nothing was happening. "Senorita Johnson," he said, her voice echoing through the now completely silent hall. "I have reviewed the photographs you sent. I need to speak with all of you." The impact was instantaneous. Henderson nearly knocked over her champagne glass. "Photographs? What photographs?" Dr. Beck, the lead lawyer, jumped out of his chair. "That's absurd. A waitress can't photograph confidential documents." Williams opened her briefcase with the calmness of someone who had dismantled billion-dollar schemes for decades. Actually, she can, especially when those documents contain evidence of corporate fraud on an international scale. He took out a stack of papers and spread them across the table, replacing the merger agreement. "Ladies and gentlemen, you are not witnessing a merger. You are witnessing the biggest money-laundering and asset-stripping scheme of the last 20 years. Her red dress woman let out a muffled scream. A shareholder stumbled as he tried to stand up. Henderson, who until then had maintained her arrogant composure, was visibly pale. "That's impossible," he stammered. "Our lawyers reviewed everything." Williams smiled coldly. Oh, his lawyers knew exactly what they were doing. "The question is whether you knew, Mr. Henderson." Kesha finally stopped working and approached the table. Her voice, now clear and firm, cut through the air like a knife. He knew. Everyone knew. Your company hasn't existed for 3 years. It's just a front for moving dirty money from international cartels. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Henderson frantically typing on his phone, probably trying to alert his superiors that the scheme had been uncovered. Williams continued. "What Miss Johnson identified weren't just asset transfer clauses. They were laundering mechanisms that would turn Whitmore Industries into a shell company in 90 days, allowing billions of dollars of criminal proceeds to be cleaned through seemingly legitimate transactions." Whitmore, now completely sober, stared at Henderson. "You came to me. You said it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. You insisted on urgency because it was urgent," said Kesha, her voice laden with an authority no one expected. "The FBI has been investigating the network for 18 months. They needed to shut down this scheme before federal authorities caught up with them. Dr. Beck tried one last desperate gambit. You can't prove any of this. It's speculation." Williams pulled a tablet from her briefcase and connected it to the room's projector. The screen lit up with dozens of bank transfers, Department of Justice documents, and FBI surveillance photographs. "I can prove everything," he said calmly, including the conversations Mr. Henderson had with representatives of the Medi cartel last week, discussing exactly how to use the merger to launder $400 million. Henderson stood up abruptly, knocking over her chair. "This is a setup. You can't frame me like this." "Actually," said Kesha, taking his phone out of his pocket. "We can." She tapped the screen and a recording began to play crystal clear. Henderson's voice 2 hours earlier in the hotel bathroom talking on the phone in Spanish about finishing the operation today and transferring everything before the feds find out. The room erupted in panic. Executives began to stand up, some trying to leave discreetly. The platinum-haired woman was in tears, realizing that his name was connected to all of this. Dr. Beck desperately tried to gather documents as if he could erase the evidence. "How did you know?" asked Whitmore, looking at Kesha with a mixture of admiration and disbelief. Kesha smiled for the first time that night. "My father didn't just teach her about contract clauses, Mr. Whitmore. He taught her to recognize when powerful people try to use her position to destroy others, and she spent the last 5 years studying every money-laundering case the FBI has made public." Williams nodded proudly. "Professor Johnson would be extremely proud. Her daughter hasn't just memorized his teachings, she's evolved them." Henderson made one last desperate attempt to leave the room, but the door opened before he could reach. 3 federal agents entered, their badges already in hand. "Mr. Henderson," said the lead agent, "you're under arrest for conspiracy, money laundering, and racketeering." As the handcuffs clicked around Henderson's wrists, he looked at Kesha with pure hatred. "You have no idea what you've just done. Some very dangerous people are going to want to talk to her." Kesha didn't look away. "Actually, I know exactly what I did. I saved Mr. Whitmore's company and helped the FBI dismantle an operation that was financing violence and destruction. And as for the dangerous people, she's being arrested in 6 different countries right now." The federal agent confirmed coordinated operation. It started 20 minutes ago, 43 simultaneous arrests. Dr. Beck tried to make his way toward the exit, but another agent intercepted him. "Dr. Beck, we need to talk to you as well. We have some questions about fees you received from criminal organizations." Within 15 minutes, half the room had been evacuated by federal agents. The executives who remained were in shock, realizing how close they had come to destroying his own life out of greed. Williams approached Kesha, who had returned to stacking plates as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. "You knew all along, didn't you?" "I suspected it 3 weeks ago," she replied calmly. "When I heard Henderson speaking Spanish on the phone, my father always said that when powerful men whisper in languages they think no one understands, they're usually planning something terrible." Whitmore approached, her voice full of reverence. "You saved my company. You saved my life. How can I ever thank you?" Kesha finally stopped working and looked at him. "By hiring people for what they know, not for what they look like, and by making sure young people like me have real opportunities to show his worth." The woman in the red dress, one of the few who hadn't been taken away in handcuffs, approached timidly. I'm sorry for what I said. I had no right to." "No," Kesha aunt. "But now you know that appearances can be deceiving and that underestimating people can be the most costly mistake of his life." Williams put away his documents, smiling. "Professor Johnson always said that the best revenge against prejudice is quiet competence. Today, you proved he was right." When the room finally emptied, leaving only Whitmore, Williams, and a few hotel employees, Kesha picked up her purse and headed for the exit. But something in his discreet smile suggested that the evening had gone exactly as she had planned. What no one imagined was that this simple waitress had spent the last 3 years working secretly as an FBI informant, using her social invisibility as the most powerful weapon against corporate corruption, and that Henderson had been only the first on a much longer list of criminals who had fatally underestimated the black woman serving his drinks. 6 months later, Kesha Johnson walked through the mirrored hallways of Whitmore Industries as Director of Compliance, earning more in a month than she had in a year waiting tables. Her daughter, Brooklyn, now attended a private school where no one judged her for where she came from. Henderson was serving a 15-year sentence for money laundering. Dr. Beck lost her law license and worked as an insurance salesman. The woman in the red dress had moved to another city after losing all her social contracts. Ms. Johnson called a young black intern, showing her a report. "I found some irregularities in the Thompson Corporation audit." Kesha smiled. She had created an exclusive trainee program for young people from the suburbs, teaching them how to detect corporate fraud. 23 cases solved in 6 months. Williams visited her every month proud. His father would be thrilled to see you turning injustice into opportunity. In her office overlooking Manhattan, she kept a photo of her father in her drawer, along with a thank-you letter from the FBI for the biggest anti-money laundering operation of the decade. The waitress everyone underestimated had become the biggest nightmare of white-collar criminals. Her story proved that true revenge is not destroying those who humiliate you, it's building something bigger than they could ever imagine. Have you ever been underestimated because of her appearance or background? Subscribe my channel, Life Means Struggle.